Hello everyone. Carahsoft Technology would like to welcome you to our Intermap webcast. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items. All of your lines have been muted to reduce background noise, and we hope you take advantage of the Q&A pod on the left side of your screen to ask any questions throughout the presentation. We will do our best to answer all of your questions by the end of the presentation. If for some reason we do not get to your questions, the Intermap team at Carahsoft will follow up with you offline. Carahsoft is a trusted government IT solutions provider, delivering software and support solutions to federal, state, and local government agencies. Carahsoft maintains dedicated teams to support sales and marketing for all of its vendors, including Intermap, Symantec, Adobe, EMC, VMware, and Red Hat. Our contact information will be at the end of the presentation, so please don't hesitate to call or email us for any of your needs. This webcast is being recorded, and a copy of the presentation will be emailed to you. At this time, I would like to introduce our speakers for today. Dan Lynch is the Director of Global Solutions Marketing. Mike Always is Director of Product Management. And Keith Halachek is Intermap Solutions Engineer. Dan, the floor is all yours.
Well, thanks, Megan, for your introduction, and welcome everyone to our webcast today, where we'll explore many of the most common problems associated with managing large geospatial data sets and their associated business intelligence-related content. We'll also spend a little bit of time looking at the ways in which industry leaders are tackling these problems and working to inject solutions and remove obstacles, duplication efforts, and overall frustrations. So let's take a moment to go over the outline for today. We'll start off looking at a few compelling industry facts and figures. Next, to get the creative juices flowing, we thought a few questions might draw up familiarity with some of you in your very own experiences. We'll then get right into the heart of the matter, showcasing some of the most common issues that the industry faces when working with volumes of both geospatial and business intelligence data that, when spatially referenced, delivers a more powerful solution, albeit a dynamic and challenging one. We'll discuss some of the best practices in overcoming these challenges, and we're going to call out one of our particular use cases, providing insight into a real challenge one of our very own clients experienced and the actions they took to remove their obstacles. We'd like to indulge just a few minutes of your time towards the end of our session, where we'll showcase some of the things Intermap is doing to address these industry challenges. And finally, we'll close things out with a question and answer period, giving you, our guests, the chance to ask any questions you may have considered prior to the webinar, or maybe they've come up during this session. Whatever the case, please keep your questions to the end of the webinar, and as Megan alluded to, feel free to use the question pod in the upper left corner of your screen today to capture your questions. With that, let's roll right into things. Well, it's quickly becoming a well-known fact in our industry, so this figure could be revealing, or it may be a common piece of information that's already familiar to you. We live in an age where the need to understand and associate location to other information or intelligence is absolutely paramount in making sound business decisions. 80% of all information has a spatial component. Think about this number for a moment, and consider this fact as we reveal some of the other striking numbers throughout the presentation. More than half of business and government use web-based mapping services on a regular and consistent basis. I imagine this number is possibly a lot higher for the audience today, and when you combine this with our last figure, it's easy to see why the management of volumes of data can really become a cumbersome effort right out of the gate. And when you consider this number and then relate it to sharing information across various departments, agencies, and levels within the government, it really can become simply staggering. Here's another revealing number. Even though most data has a spatial component to it, and even though more than half of us use web-based mapping services on a regular basis, a mere 5% of our employees actually know what to do with this information. What does this number really mean? Well, sure, it's an average, and some of you may be thinking that, well, your number is probably a lot higher than this, but if we spin it in a slightly different way, it means on average that 1 out of every 20 employees right now in an average organization possess the ability to even get access to this spatially instrumental content. And on top of that, this same fact defines the resources in your organization that have the right geospatial and potentially GIS skills to do what they need to do with the data in the first place. Now consider this for just a moment. This number from our good friends at IBM. Why is it such a challenge to manage our geospatial data sets? 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are created every day by our society. What's a quintillion, you ask? Well, it's not a bad question. And until I did some research myself, it wasn't a number that I was familiar with. But for reference, 1 quintillion is a 1 followed by 18 zeros. And to put things in a different perspective, that's the equivalent of 57.5 billion 32 gigabyte iPads. That's a pretty amazing number. Every day we're generating a mountain of data, and you may be thinking, but wait, that's not all just geospatial data. But remember earlier that the majority of data managed today in our economy has a geospatial component. And recall earlier in this slide deck that that was 80% we referenced. It is a number that's commonly becoming known. Actually, the latest reference that we saw on this number was from a congressional report on the management of large geospatial data sets across the various levels of government. Okay, so here's one last number to set the stage. With all the projects, programs, and solutions we're working on today, it's estimated that on average, your data repository will grow another 50% in the next year alone. Manual solutions may have worked in the past, but the future strategy must consider all of these facts and figures so that we don't get lost in the tsunami of geospatial data. So let's pose a few questions as we begin to frame the problems and solutions relating to managing our geospatial data sets. Imagine how much easier it might be if everyone in your department, organization, or agency were seeing the very same information. Do you ever find that various key geospatial data sets are housed in multiple or possibly disconnected silos? Imagine if you could centrally manage all of your spatial data. Do you find at times that you need to go to one place to fulfill analysis on some of your geospatial data, and then use very different processes in analyzing other key data sets? On top of that, you then may need to run extra steps on these data sets to get closer to your final answer. Just think about how much more efficient it might be to carry out your analyses using a fully integrated solution. Instead of potentially overwhelming already constrained resources and GIS experts within your organization, imagine the same information if it could be delivered to all of your designated end users. Now, all of these points really do seed the desired end result that we search for, which is really making better decisions through more efficient and effective access to your geospatial data and associated business intelligence content. So let's move now into speaking about some of the challenges and, of course, solutions that are out there in the industry today. As we've seen from industry facts and figures, managing the sheer volume of geospatial data is becoming a significant problem nowadays. And to compound this issue, we're exposed to many formats, projections, and various qualities, further impacting on our ability to get to the correct answers efficiently. Many operations employ a relational database system to manage their data, and as our volume of data grows, several concerns begin to crop up. So let's explore some of these specific areas of challenge in managing geospatial data sets. First off, many of the current geospatial data management systems are not resilient, and in general, it becomes too easy to delete entire tables of data by accident. There are ways to guard against this, but the risk can still exist. There, of course, also is a vulnerability in current systems for data corruption to occur. There's a challenge in ensuring a balance between your data storage best practices and your query performance within your database. The challenge can be rendered down into the decision of what is more important, data storage or query performance. There's typically a challenge in current systems being able to deliver all three of consistency, availability, and the system's ability to reroute communication links should one of them break. Well, one of the key solutions continues to grow and develop in our industry, and that's really big data technologies and techniques. So let's explore those a little bit. Scale-out architectures have been developed to store large amounts of data, and purpose-built appliances have improved the process capability. As well, developments continue to grow in combining these architectures with pre-computed batch processes working within what's referred to as a NoSQL database, resulting in improved data accessibility both in volume and in speed. So that's a quick snapshot of things on the infrastructure and hardware side, but let's move over to mention process improvements. It's not nearly as well known as it should be, but in today's management of vast geospatial data sets, there's a large volume of these data sets that are either duplicated or synthesized, which basically just means they've been tweaked or adjusted slightly and rendered into a slightly different format or answer. Now, if you consider your workflow, there could be more than a dozen departments that are modifying similar data sets for similar needs, but this in turn can generate terabytes upon terabytes of excess data that really isn't as useful in the long term. As each of these multiple groups synthesize more and more data, consider now how terabytes of data can become petabytes, all backed up on a regular basis, which continues to potentially bog down your environment, and also maybe for no apparent reason. The goal really needs to be about keeping your data footprint smaller, which results in faster access and less duplication. These days, we're not just working with geospatial data to solve our problems. Consider the multitude of data sets that we consult separately and manually in order to get a more complete answer. Think of unstructured data as any information that either does not have a defined data model or is not organized in a predefined manner. Think about the various geocoding information that goes along with our spatial data: spreadsheets, text, emails, demographics, land use information, traffic, weather-related intelligence, real estate information, legal, utilities, and really the list is seemingly endless, and connecting these pieces of information together is truly a common challenge. So when we flip over to the solution side, let's talk a little bit about schemas. So a schema really can be best described as a blueprint in how the data important to your organization are organized. They're not new to the industry, but many can be restrictive and hard to change. The key is to ensure implementation of a schema that can adapt to changes over the life of the data system. It's also essential to implement strong and focused ETL or extract, transform, and load tools to ensure smooth transition from one-time projects to more of a middleware solution where you're performing data harmonization consistently and in near real time. So for some in the industry, managing vast amounts of geospatial data requires upgrades and additions to their hardware infrastructure every time their budget cycle comes around again. Employees tend to bump up against storage limits on a regular basis, which can throw momentum into jeopardy. Well, one of the first considerations to this challenge is through the use of what's called virtualization. Virtualization is essentially employing several operating systems running in parallel on a single CPU. This strategy helps to reduce overhead costs. Using virtualization, an enterprise can better manage updates and rapid changes to the operating system and applications without actually disrupting the users. So just think about virtualization as the way to reduce the data footprint within your organization. You know virtualization is working when your answers come in less time, your data is more secure, and your answers are more accurate because there's less likelihood of duplicate data sets. The old model of upgrading and adding hardware infrastructure every time data thresholds are nearing capacity is dead. The solution is really cloud services, and they rely on sharing of resources to achieve economies of scale, which really just means you're increasing the volume output and productivity with fewer people. With cloud computing, multiple users can access a single server to retrieve and update their data without purchasing licenses for different applications. Cloud computing allows companies to avoid upfront infrastructure costs, but it also allows enterprises to get their applications up and running faster, with improved manageability and less maintenance, and really it enables IT departments to more rapidly adjust resources to meet the needs. We're starting to see more organizations deploy their product or service into the public cloud, but transition to a private cloud where control over security is stricter is really growing in popularity. So speaking of another challenge, software limitations can directly impact spatial data management, as it can require expensive licensing, significant training, and sometimes you can hit up against single points of failure with key staff members who are needed to get the right answer to the problem. Think about the times your team of skilled experts work to deliver answers and solutions based on the anticipated needs. The team goes away and does the job understood and delivers the results, but it may not be quite what's needed. In this scenario, there's a risk of multiple iterations back and forth with the team using specialized software where the solution comes through, but potentially this can be time-consuming and results in frustration amongst team members and possibly across the entire team. So to compound software issues, the ability to then share the results with all interested parties, it's not always an easy task. Think about the scenario just described. If there was a more generic way to serve up results and communicate to those who don't have a technical degree or complicated analysis software, wouldn't that be a better approach to an age-old problem? Or looking at things from a slightly different perspective, imagine a scenario where you experience the best of both worlds. Consider the notion of enhancing your workflow of expert software and resources, still using it, of course, but also being able to distribute to a wider audience. Well, the solution in this case is really all about web publishing. And consider the ability to easily deliver your geospatial answers to any end user quickly via the web without your audience requiring heavy GIS software or geospatial expertise to access. Now, anyone with an internet connection can get to your information based on authorization. Web publishing is great for any audience, especially non-GIS users, but there will be times when your customer may want to access your information via web services or an API call. This scenario demonstrates an excellent opportunity to allow your customers who are more sophisticated geospatial information consumers and can draw specific components from your database to marry with their own unique content, thereby in the end delivering more accurate solutions. You know, I often wonder how many suffer from the challenges in managing geospatial data when the topic of consistency and quality comes up. Have any of you ever encountered situations where multiple team members are accessing and modifying multiple versions of a data set under the processes and policies of your organization, but yet they still might encounter some issues? We put workflow structure in place, quality rules, guidelines, and quality control gates, but occasionally data quality issues come up and they can cause grief for both our customers and for our own internal resources. It's a fine art to take a technically trained team employing state-of-the-art processes and tools, working on volumes of geospatial data with the goal of delivering seamless, consistent, homogeneous, and quality data sets that would almost suggest a single person did all the work. Well, some in our industry have employed what's called converged storage, which is an architecture combining storage and compute into a single entity. When used alongside an appropriate database architecture, schema, and ETL tools, well, you're well on your way to guarding against corruption of files, deletion of files, and potentially duplication of geospatial data. Data security is really amongst one of the most determined challenges to solve, keeping ahead of the curve and securing the volumes of data our industry generates every day. We really live in a world where we need to communicate geospatially relevant information and solutions to a growing audience of savvy end users so that they in turn can make more informed decisions. But this world is also becoming more and more plagued with security intrusions and impacts that can really jeopardize the very information driving improvements and development in our economy. The first guard in solving data security breaches really rests with us, the users and administrators of the data itself. It's imperative to ensure there are strong policies in place dictating the rules to follow in managing and sharing information. We saw earlier how using cloud services makes it easier to share our information, and it's important to ensure there are well-defined responsibilities with respect to the cloud services provider. There must be ongoing monitoring and audits of cloud services to assess data integrity, confidentiality, and availability. Now, many are making the move from the public cloud to the private cloud services where the control of information is exposed to a much higher level of security. The second half of the equation rests with what's commonly referred to as an integrated security intelligence. Think about this as tools and processes executed by IT staff to identify trends or clues in potential security attacks before they occur. When carried out successfully, the approach is automated and it's monitored across the entire organization, spanning log management, event management, anomaly detection, configuration and vulnerability management, as well as risk management. So Mike, the other day you were telling me about one of our very own customers and the challenges they were experiencing in managing their volume of geospatial data. Can you share this story with the group today?
Sure, Dan, thanks. We've been working with a customer in Southeast Asia, a government agency, who has a number of the problems you've been highlighting. They work with a lot of geospatial data. They have satellite imagery, high-resolution elevation data, they have property data, demographics, risk information, and they have a very strong GIS expertise. They understand how to use this data. They work with software from Intergraph and from Esri, so they have sophisticated platforms. But they have been struggling with how to share the information across multiple departments, how to get answers from the data, and then most of all, how to get all of that information combined in a way that it answers questions for their residents, the end consumer of all this. And so if you break down the challenges that they're experiencing, number one is to be able to share content across multiple departments, some of them not being GIS savvy. And so it's not just a matter of having one more license to the existing software. They need another way of sharing information. A second case is where they're duplicating efforts. And we saw a specific example of that where 7 people created virtually the identical data set because they didn't have one authoritative location for storing that information and making everyone aware that it existed. And so a lot of duplication of effort in a situation like that. Third is they are generating multiple data sets with largely the same information, and so their cost structure is constantly increasing beyond what's necessary. They need more servers, more storage, and generally more infrastructure to manage the ever-increasing volume of data that they're created, some of which is unnecessary because they're not sharing it effectively. The fourth problem is that they have no efficient way to publish their geospatial answers to the public. Rather than making raw data available, they'd like to combine that data and provide answers to their residents that have questions. And so they don't have a great platform for pulling information from all their different software, combining it, and putting answers out. And the last problem is vaguer, but it's probably the most important, and that is they just don't feel that they're keeping up with all of the demands. They have, like a lot of GIS departments, the sense that they're overwhelmed with requests. They don't have a good answer for how they're going to be able to tackle all of the reporting that they have to provide, and they don't really have time to do their core work because they're constantly bombarded with requests for additional data, additional answers. So Intermap's been helping them to overcome some of these problems using our GeoPro server software. Without talking too much detail about the infrastructure, we're working with them on how GeoPro can help them combine their data sets and provide answers and data in a more collaborative environment to let their different departments share data as well as put answers out to their residents. Okay?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And I think one other point that kind of resonates in my mind is that, we haven't gone into that organization to try to convince them to replace their infrastructure or their workflow. We're really just working with them to make sure they keep their workflow and where we can enhance and help them in managing that. But thank you for that, sharing that information. I appreciate it. I would like to take a moment to elaborate a little bit on how Intermap is tackling the challenges in managing large volumes of geospatial data. As Mike mentioned, Intermap has developed a geospatial data management solution that we've named GeoPro. In a nutshell, GeoPro is a server software product that's really designed specifically to serve disparate spatial information and the associated analytics to end users of web and desktop applications. So if you look at this particular graphic, it's a common infrastructure that you may have seen before, but in this case we've got our data layer. That's all of the disparate data sets, structured or unstructured. We have our ETL tools that then the GeoPro, where you have that highlighted in the middle, is really our middleware layer that we're going to showcase here just at the end of this session. At the end of the day, it's really about how all of our users can gain access at that application layer, how to make it easy for them to get those answers, those integrated answers, but be able to have that brain, what we call a GeoPro, at the center to be able to help manage all of that. So to give you more insight into GeoPro, I'd like to pass things over now to one of Intermap's solutions engineers, that's Keith Holchek, to highlight some of the benefits of GeoPro. So Keith, over to you.
Thank you, Dan. What I'd like to do here is demonstrate some of the ways that GeoPro can help to share data and information and help organizations break the silos of the data being used only in their GIS department or through personalized requests. This is an example of a shared web map that we've created with GeoPro to help a cities, counties, states prepare for a hurricane event in Savannah. A simple application to allow any user, both within the organization or from the public, to access a website, have the ability to look and start doing planning for if there's a Category 3 hurricane event, where the hospitals are located and the size of the hospitals to help planning for where they may take the injured, or where they may have to prepare that some big hospitals would be flooding themselves. So just a simple web map that you can share the URL, anyone can access that site, or you can embed the map within your city or county or state website. And this was created with just a few simple clicks. As well, you can provide that data to be accessed through someone's existing desktop application. Here's Esri's ArcMap connecting to the same WMS server that we've shared this data as. So that's one key point, is that all this data is shared in OGC compliant formats. Easily accessible. This can be secured, so only authenticated users can access it. But here's, an example of using the same data within my my desktop software that I'm comfortable working within, and then bringing in additionally my own data that I've been collecting and using on my desktop. Additionally, we can start looking at, for instance, we've hosted all of our elevation data on our GeoPro server, and then using the tools available to us with application, we can build a focused tool to allow for e-commerce site. And here, what I can do is just select a little area where I may want to purchase data, create my area of interest, and now we'll generate a price for the data products that are available in that location. I can simply add these to my cart, and then I'll receive an email to download that data. So GeoPro hosts the data, allows some capabilities to draw an area of interest and then generate the output based on the square kilometers or square mileage of that area of interest, and then clip and ship the data. Additionally, we can create an application that may be focused on an industry problem. This is our Insight Pro application, and once again, it's built on GeoPro. All the data is hosted on GeoPro and shared to this website. And within here, I can bring in thousands of addresses and perform analysis against risk for flooding, risk for wildfires, as well as generating elevation information. So here we have all these locations of some big box retailers. We perform some analysis and start identifying what flood return period they're in, a 20-year flood, a 100-year flood, 500-year flood, as well as showing the FEMA data that's used for the insurance industry and what zones FEMA says it's within. As well, I can generate some information on the elevation of those locations and what the source of that elevation is. So this is a great example of industry-focused application that is being hosted using GeoPro and solving industry problems. So, and GeoPro itself has a web-based user interface for your administration. Very simple. We're all used to using the desktop applications with lots of tools and menus, which are great, but sometimes very confusing to find the way to accomplish what you're trying to. So GeoPro is designed for access on a web browser through your laptop or desktop, as well as a tablet. So the tablet interface will appear the same and will function all the same, with three main activities: data connections, creating maps, and then sharing. So we can easily go and look at what data connections are made here, and using authentication we can control who can access this, who can see what data. Simple task to go create a data connection from a local source, from a database, or from a web source, so you can connect to other WMS or WFS, for instance, services. So if I choose a local file, I can just quickly select this. We allow you to bring in many different formats, so your shape files, map info files, KML, database connecting to SQL Server, Oracle. We allow you to bring in all these disparate data sources, and it combines them and creates it into one common schema so that you can work with all of those together. So you've got all your vector formats, as well as all your raster formats, your VIL, your geotips, the PNGs, so on. Then we can stylize those individual data connections, for instance. We can create caches, tiled caches, in both the projection, the native projection that's in, as well as the popular visualization projection that's used by Google and Microsoft Bing, as well as selecting any additional projection or coordinate system that you may want to create a cache in to share with other applications. We can also then go into the map activity and easily create a map. For instance, before we were looking at that storm surge from a Category 3 hurricane. And I can go in here, I'll have more controls over how things are visualized. Can easily just, do simple changing of colors, for instance. And when I apply that, you'll also see that if I go to my end application, if I refresh it, we'll start to see the change in that too. So it's dynamically displaying the data, whether it's from a flat file like a shapefile or from your database. If your database is changing, then GeoPro will reflect those changes in the shares, the WMS and web map shares that you can create. If I look at shares, we can easily share a new data connection or a map. So with my Wyoming wind turbines, I can just quickly share that. Not that. So I can quickly just share a data set that I've brought in, select the type, in this case I'll choose a WMS, and it gives me the different projection and coordinate systems that data is available in. And then now it's available to be connected to using any application, desktop application or web-based tool. So overall, GeoPro is an application that we've designed for ease of use to easily aggregate disparate data sources, to allow GIS and non-GIS users to style and then also create different maps to share. And once they're shared, then your end users are limitless with how you want to reach them, whether it's through a simple data connection through a desktop application or through a web map that you can embed into your company or organization's website, or as far as building tools such as an e-commerce engine to clip and ship map data, or an industry-specific tool like Insight Pro that answers questions regarding risk. So, thank you, Dan.
Well, thanks, Keith, for this demonstration. And once again, thank you all for joining Carahsoft and Intermap today for what we hope was an informative session on the problems in managing geospatial data sets. I'd like to hand things back to Megan Wine over at Carahsoft. Megan?
All right, thank you, Dan. We're going to open it up for the Q&A session now, so if you have any questions, please feel free to send them to the Q&A pod on the left side of your screen, and we'll get started with those.
Okay, well, we have a question here asking if we could repeat again where the statistics of percentages of data towards the beginning, the 80% number that was used. So in our research, we found that that figure actually in several published locations. The most recent being a congressional report that was written on behalf of the state and county governments. It was one that was published, I believe, in 2013. We also have others that are cited from both IBM and some of the other big data management companies. So it really is becoming a growing concern. It's becoming a known number. And really, if you consider everything that you touch these days, there is some sort of geospatial intelligence to everything. Every location, everything originates from a location, if you think about it that way. We're happy to share these statistics and the documents that support them as well, if anyone's interested. So another question here is, can you define synthesized data? Essentially, if you think about the example that Mike always used with one of our specific clients, they actually had 7 different employees across their government departments that were attempting to create an exact shoreline for their particular state. And what we discovered was that all 7 of those activities had created a different shoreline. In other words, if we superimposed all of them together, none of them were the same. And so that's really what we mean when we say synthesize. It's where folks are creating, they're taking data sets and they're creating and they're enhancing it. They're doing something with it. In this case, although maybe not using a lot of space within their database, the fact remained that there were still 7 different synthesized pieces of data that were all being backed up. And so think about that as you consider your own experiences, some of the large data sets that you may be using, and the fact that there may be multiple staff members that are doing something very similar, maybe with different tools, and then archiving that information to be accessed at a later time. It can get very complicated when that becomes something that gets shared with other agencies or departments. Then it becomes very difficult to understand truly which one is a master that should be regarded as the actual data set. So that's what we mean there. Just looking at some other questions here. So here's a good question actually. What software hardware would I need to run GeoPro? So the interesting thing here is that if we speak to the hardware side, it's a standard server. So from a GeoPro perspective, it's something that can either be installed on one of your existing servers or racks, or it's something that could be supplied by Intermap. From a software perspective, well, really the software is browser-based. So think about it from that perspective. If you have an internet connection, then you have it. That's how easy it is, really. Okay, another question here. Does Intermap's terrain elevation come with GeoPro? And the answer to that is yes. That's definitely something that we could bundle and package, and it is definitely an easy way for users to access our NextMap products. So it is something that under consultation we could definitely discuss. We're just looking through the questions here. Here's a question. Can the information be presented to a mobile device? The answer is absolutely yes. That any smart device that has access to the internet, that GeoPro is available and serves up those answers. And from Keith's demonstration, it's very dynamic, meaning that think about a scenario where you have one of your staff members out in the field with a tablet, and they have called in to their head office to speak to someone who may be, accessing various amounts of information and geospatial data and other intelligence information that's important to your activities. They could easily be having a simple conversation back and forth where they're looking at the same information. And think of the field crew saying, hey, can you do this? What about adding in that? Do we have access to this? Or, by the way, I have information that I'd like to now provide that we can get into the overall model. It's a very effective way, dynamically, on the fly, to be able to make those adjustments so that there isn't a large delay between, the need in the field and the need and the actual activities coming from head office. Looking here. Oh, we got some questions maybe here. Let's see. We're just going through all the questions here. Sketchy, okay. Yeah, so it appears that there might be some participants that that couldn't quite hear everything in the session, and that session will be available, of course, as a recording. This one. You want to handle that?
Yeah, so there's a question regarding the security management techniques that protect this information from misuse. So GeoPro is fully authenticated. You set up your users and roles to allow proper access to only the correctly credentialed individuals, as well as the data connections you create, the maps you create, and then the shares you create can all be controlled through authentication. As well, we connect using SSL and it's over HTTPS. So you have that secure encrypted transformation of information that's only accessible through the properly credentialed individuals, and that's both, like I said, the data and the map shares. So you can control that through an administrative function in your settings.
Okay, we have one other question here, and it's a pretty simple one. But what does Insight Pro do? So part of what Keith wanted to show the session today was the fact that he is Intermap developing GeoPro to support the problems we see in the various industries. We use it ourselves. So Insight Pro is a web application. Essentially, it's a natural risk hazard visualization and analysis tool, and it's something that has been built with the help of GeoPro, of course. And if you consider, the target audience for that type of tool, certainly risk managers, potentially, of course, underwriters, insurance underwriters, really anyone that has a vast amount of locations, and they could be businesses, they could be warehousing organizations, all kinds of commercial enterprise that have global footprint, if you will, of their assets. The idea there is to be able to load up that portfolio of locations and then analyze using Insight Pro to understand what natural hazards and what risk factor may come to those various locations. The idea behind it is, if you consider something like a hurricane where there's a large amount of flooding that occurs along the coastline, we've even seen situations of course, even in the U.S. Recently, where hospitals were totally unprepared, and they needed to evacuate all of their sensitive equipment, of course, their patients, but they had to do so in flooded waters, right, to other locations. The concept behind the Insight Pro is to be able to give people the tools and the power to be able to plan prior to that event and be able to make intelligent business decisions to be able to, and at the end of the day, to be able to save lives, really. I think that's all the questions.
Janice,
this one here?
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we are done with the questions. So again,
right.
We'll hand it back to you, Megan.
Thanks, Dan. If everyone could please take a moment to answer the polling questions currently displayed on your screen, it would be greatly appreciated. I want to thank all of our participants as well as Dan, Mike, and Keith for being with us today. We hope this webcast has been helpful for you and your organization. If you have any further questions or would like to request more information, feel free to contact the Intermap team at Carahsoft. Our representatives would be happy to send you additional information or provide you with government discounted price quotes. Our contact information is displayed on your screen, so please don't hesitate to call or email us. Thank you and have a great day.